podcast listeners, if you hear my voice right now, I need you to do something for me. I want you to take out your phone or on your computer, go to Apple Podcasts, search for Ask Your Oldhead podcast. You'll see my logo, my little picture, my little image there. Find the show. Please rate and write a review. It's a small thing, but it helps others find this work and find what I'm doing here. And it really, really matters, as small as that may seem. So if you can please do that before we get into the show, I would much appreciate it. Thank you for listening. Let's get into it. Peace. Peace. I'm Majestic.
My brother, Justice Rajee.
Man, so, we stand here tonight on the opening days of, one of my favorite times of year is Black History Month. And, when I had to post on the internet's my annual reminder that Black History Month exists because Black people did something for themselves for the benefit of Black people. And nobody gave it to us. Nobody picked the shortest month on purpose. It wasn't due to a government program. Everybody else came to the party later after Black folks had been doing a thing, again, for themselves and keeping it more or less to themselves for several decades. You know what I'm saying? And especially in the pursuit of the joy of scholarly learning about our what? Selves. So, given we are in the early days and this year in the early days of active attempts at erasure of and discrediting, you know what I'm saying? The subtext of almost every time you hear woke DEI or what's the other one? Merit is black, black, black. Or I'm not even gonna go hard R tonight, just in out of love and companionship. You know what I'm saying? Because, I don't want to do it that way. But that's all I hear is, yeah. I think it's point. I think it's time to just have a word on that. And it's been so much wild stuff that it's hard to even like have a. I don't trust myself to like lock in on any of it too fast because if you do that, you just like getting pulled emotionally. You know what I mean? Like it's like somebody trying to push you. It's like somebody put their finger in your face saying, I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you. You know what I'm saying? But like, you know what I'm saying? If I know you're the only child, so you ain't never necessarily had to deal with that sort of weird stuff. But I'm just saying not that I had that much too. We just with Roughhouse, but I mean, I seen it in movies that somebody did that sort of thing. Yeah, guys. So I wanted to, make a moment, talk a little about this moment in context for us, and even I think maybe if we could center on like the first couple weeks of this administration has solidified my thought that if as a community we are not centered on how we intentionally be about us, it's gonna be a hard 4 years at a minimum. If folks really try to be on some, I'm gonna just do it my way. I'm gonna be an individual, or I ain't gotta go to none of the Black people meetings because yeah, it's wild times out there. So I guess I open that up to you. Say like, what's some of your just thoughts with Black History Month and just some of the things we've seen in these first 2 weeks of Trump 2.0.
Yeah. So let me first give a music example. Public Enemy's first album, right, was like, it was some jams on there.
Mm.
There was some stuff that you was like, okay, I get PE. Do they sound a lot different than a lot of other New York rappers at that moment? No, but it's they jamming, right? Like it's some stuff that plays late night. My Uzi weighs the ton.
Mm-hmm.
You know, um, that you like, yo, this is hard. Like, you know what I mean? But you don't know what to make of it. It's something, but you don't know what to make of it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And just you get it takes a nation of millions to hold us back.
Yeah.
And the difference between the Public Enemy's first album and It Takes a Nation of Millions was one of the biggest differences between what first and second album I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Maybe other than the first and second Outkast album, you could probably make a little call for that.
Mm-hmm. I can see that. Yeah.
Trump 2.0 is It Takes a Nation of Millions in the worst way. It is thought through to the degree it can be. It is organized and it is made for the moment to advance the interest. Again, the first Public Enemy album was really good. The second Public Enemy album made an impact.
Yeah.
And I'm flipping that. The first Trump, in retrospect, we're like, oh, he did stuff. He didn't know what he was doing. He didn't know where they were going.
Yeah.
He picked the wrong people. None of that happened this time. It was a clear, produced process.
Yeah.
And so I use that as an example for like when there is a system based in, some of the things we talked about, like there is a line of thought behind what they are doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
There is like thinkers who have thought about this. We all said Project 2025. He was like, I don't think so.
Ah.
Surprise, gotcha. I did. The
Ah,
Bomb
totally
Squad did
into
produce
it.
this album. Tricked you.
Right.
The Bomb Squad didn't do it. Yes, they did. Right.
Ah.
So, you know, and that's what is happening with a clear way of dismantling things. And we got so used to being like, oh, no one will dismantle the systems as they are.
Right. I
Who would
mean,
do that?
right. They like some of this stuff. You know what I'm
They
saying? They use
they're
these
not going to
things.
go so far to harm things. And now you get the answer, yes, they will.
Yeah.
And so I use that in the context, and again, I don't want to do the black like when I was your age, we had to walk through 3 feet of snow, right?
Yeah.
But I'm going to use this for an example. For me, this reminds me of how I felt as a young child with like Reagan.
Hmm.
It reminds me of how I felt in, in 84, right? When the original bum rush and Walter Mondale maybe didn't even win his home state, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then 88, where you get, by all accounts, a good man, Dukakis, and he gets bum rushed. Again, interesting connection by a crew of people who were willing to do the dirt. The whole thing that happened with the brother in
Yeah, the Willie Horton.
Willie Horton stuff of Boston, and just defaming good people in order to win. And I remember how I felt, and how I felt at that juncture, and what I was hearing from people around me was that the federal government was not acting in my interest.
Mhm.
The federal government was not acting in the interest of my community. And I took that the federal government was not acting as an interest in my community as a just as a natural course of events until I did not.
Mhm.
I remember a time when, yes, when we had Black History Month, it wasn't on television. You had to go be with your community and celebrate it. Target wasn't telling you they were celebrating you,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, wasn't no gift cards, wasn't no like cards in the Walgreens or the CVS or the Rite Aid or the Eckerd. There was other brands back then. That's why I'm naming all those. You know
Shout
what I'm
out to
saying?
Eckerd. That
Yeah,
was good
remember
that you
Eckerd?
did that. Yeah, that was good that you did that. Shout out. That was
Yeah,
only. I only felt like that was only in Jersey and like right outside of Philly. I never really felt. I never saw Eckerd in Philadelphia. It,
yeah,
there's another thing about Toys R Us. But we had that conversation another day.
yeah.
However, I used to want to go to Toys R Us, man. It wasn't in the town. But anyway, like, so it felt like community had to serve community because you
Mhm.
could not take for granted that the broader community was going to lift you up. And I think what we're seeing with the explicit and implicit forms of erasure, because I think there's explicit ones, and then there's just a seeding the landscape where everyone retrenches. Some people will retrench in actual activity, and some people will retrench in name of things, which you have to be strategic, right? But you have this retrenching. And so I think it happening for Black History Month is the best example to remember that the things that you do when you recognize yourself are the things that give meaning to it. Because as we've talked about, and I often say, power that's given to you is not yours to have. It can be yours to have in the short term. It can be great that it's being shared with you. It can be the equitable or right thing, but it doesn't mean it's your power. And I think what we are experiencing is that. So for me, it's been a lot of Gil Scott, you know, because I think when you listen to a music, when people were framing a time, when you had to talk about your experience, and your experience was not just supported in the name or because we were at that place in society, it was because you had to, as people would say, accept your own and be yourself. So
Yeah.
that's how, like, I feel. I think you made an amazing point, and I'm gonna ask you to add on just around this concept. One, that it was scholarly,
Hmm.
and what did it mean when we defined things on our own terms versus, frankly, looking, even though it is the right thing to expect of people who are as American as anyone else to be accepted and seen as that, but we have history that shows us that it often falls short.
Yeah. Well, and I don't remember. I mean, I remember when I would meet people, and we've talked about this now a couple times in our conversations, who, you know, were not privy to a mostly black environment in their youth, or they were, they didn't go to the black empower, I guess, like they didn't understand, like, oh, going to the black empowerment tonight, you know what I'm saying, like coming to America, and
Right, right.
like you knew the black awareness rally, like, you know what I'm saying, we good girls there, like that sentiment of, even if you weren't in, you know whatever community or neighborhood space you were in, like this ethos of, yeah, like there's a place, and they're gonna bring a scholar in to speak on something, or the local fraternal, one of the fraternal organizations is, or sororities, or both of them, or the church. Somebody is gonna bring somebody black in to say something about black people stuff that you should know as a black person, and other people are not necessarily invited. They could come, but, like, we wasn't expecting you to show up. We wasn't asking for a development grant from some large philanthropy. I mean, I know folks used to raise money for stuff, to do different community events. But even in the music, it was the ethos that, like, yo, we supposed to study, right? And supposed to learn about ourselves. And, like, this is the way you can, you know, counter was a countermeasure to not seeing yourself very much on TV, or if you were in a learning environment in your school, and your textbooks for sure didn't have no whole lot, like you might have had Crispus Attucks in your drawing, or Frederick Douglass, but it wasn't a super deep bench of blackness in your in school history class. But the energy outside of that space was, yo, come, learn, make some intentional efforts, and learn something about black people, and learn something about where your people come from, or learn. I remember the exercises when you had to learn all the capitals in Africa, you know what I'm saying, and
Yeah,
all the
yeah.
countries, you know what I'm saying, and I mean, like that. Like I went to the preschool. We had Hannibal up. We had the middle of the Budweiser.
But
King of
ooh,
King of beers with all the leaders on the by this thing where I wash my hands. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, like Hannibal over there. You know what I'm saying? My grandfather had one of them drawers. Clearly they was giving about, or had, I don't know how that got distributed, and I don't, one of those footnotes of history. Who was the black person in the ad agency that got Got
I would
Budweiser to
love
do that. We
I
need to
would
find.
love to
We got to
learn
find
and
that
know the
information.
person. Yeah, we got to find out who is the brother or sister that was like, you know what? We gonna put the great kings of Africa and we gonna post these joints for Black History Month in all of the liquor stores
So,
and carry out stores all across America. And everybody that's Black in every part of America is going to have these in their homes, even if their families don't drink
drink,
beer.
right? You don't drink, but you still got the joy, right? So, and the very keen awareness that like these were intentional efforts to for us to see ourselves in the world, see ourselves in the past, in specifically, but also in the past beyond whatever we might have known about being growing up in the United States. Uh, an intentional effort to understand the world with a larger scope, and then and especially that sense that yeah, your federal government is openly hostile to your community. You know what I'm saying? Like if you know somebody that got one of them good government jobs with the good bennies, they gotta keep it low so that they can make the money they can make, take care of their family, but don't get too ostentatious up in there. You know what I'm saying? Like the United Negro College Fund, the commercials will be telling you about, a mine is a terrible thing to waste. You know what I'm saying? Like this was real, like, some folks I'm sure would give a class analysis that they just wanted you to be part of the bourgeoisie or something. But
Well,
I ain't
also I
I
think
ain't with all that.
it's important to note to your point though, not to your point like I'm agreeing with. I disagreeing
Yeah,
with you. I agree with you. At that point, as what we've talked about, Black folks lived much closer in proximity to each other. So even sometimes when we have the conversation about like class in those times, even with a class, you only lived across the street or across the bridge. Like you didn't. We only had a certain parts of America where Black folks could move deep into the suburbs.
yeah, yeah. You
Right?
couldn't
I
get
mean, we're
too
only talking
deep.
about DC, maybe Atlanta, right? We're not
Yeah,
talking about a lot of places in America where Black folks is moving more than 20 to 30 miles
yeah,
from other Black folks at that time.
yeah. And at least usually, even if you moved, some significant part of your people was still wherever your people was from. You know what I mean? So
Absolutely.
like, we moved to Willenboro, which was super black, at least super black to me at the time. You know what I mean?
No,
But
no,
my grandfather, my
Willenboro was
aunt,
super Black.
my uncles, everybody else was in Trenton. So when we was going to see people, we was all going back to Trenton. We was going to the same spots. We was going to the same, my mom still worked in Trenton. Like I did not have a disconnection, from the space because it still felt like the place that I be at sometimes. I mean, as much as you could feel like you be somewhere when you're 8 years old. You know what I'm saying? Like, and so you get to this world we in now, and this energy they coming in, and they coming in hard. They like, yo, we don't care if we mess up all kinds of stuff that might be good. Because in the end, it's like we'll mess it all up, and then something will get sorted out, and we're willing to use the leverage of yeah, I mean, we'll just cancel the whole program. And then we don't have to have a debate about what's meritorious and what's not meritorious, right? Like we don't believe in we don't believe in this thing that you think we believe in, right? And again, we're willing to risk um there not being an answer if we close a program that might actually do a good thing, what's the downside if there's nobody that can, maybe wage the either the legal fight or is it at the limits of what nonviolent social protests can do or like it's a very wild stuff that's happening, you know what I mean? And the I was not surprised with the I mean they ended up rescinding it. And I mean, I guess the test will be, and this is I'll be, just Adamus on this one and say, contract law is the most powerful and consistent sort of law in the American project. Consistently, like if you got a contract, they usually kind of go like, yeah, that was some trash, but y'all both signed that trash contract, so y'all got to deal with it. And how far they're willing to go to try to challenge contract law, I think it's going to be the armchair lawyer. I play a lawyer on TV sometimes. Like I got a law degree, but I've read some books. Is I think going to end up being the testament, right? The thing that this circles back to at some point in the future. I guess in a positive or a negative spin, right? That and I think the hook is almost like, let me scare you with what we're doing, so you sign something else that changes what you agreed we all are bound to the first time. So then we can talk about the thing you signed second, because you had a good contract and then you got scared and thought they was going to cancel the contract. So you signed a new contract and then they be like, oh, actually, we couldn't even do that other contract, but you signed this one now. So now that you signed this, we got you. And um, it's a wholesale. To me, it feels like the rest of America is experiencing, or at least for some people. Some people I think are still in, maybe not, but like the level of uncertainty of direct engagement with the public authority that our community has dealt with for so long, that we like sort of we can some of us at least can sometimes kind of couch it like, yeah, man, they said they was gonna do this, but they ain't really gonna do that. Or this is supposed to come, but they're supposed to hire somebody to do, but they're gonna be just like the last person. You know what I mean? Where you just, you like, yeah, this piece of paper is as good as the paper is written on. If I don't actually get the check, the payout, or I don't actually see the equipment doesn't actually get dropped off at the community center. You know what I mean? We wasn't getting our hopes up too high anyway, kind of energy. And it's going to be fascinating to see how other people deal with that, right? Um, I'm concerned for some of us who purport to be like, I continually operate on the fringe, but maybe are not aware how comfortable they got, sort of thinking maybe it wasn't like that no more. You know what I mean? So they like, oh man, how could they do this? And it's like, oh,
Well, if I can share, I think that's part of this conversation about like history
hmm
and the kind of disdain that people start to have for history that doesn't tickle their belly buttons, that doesn't blow their hair back.
hmm
Like it's kind of like if you have a certain perspective, then you love this writer. If you have a certain perspective, you love Marcus Garvey. If you have a certain perspective, you love Audre Lorde. If you have a certain perspective, you're a Baldwin person. If you have a certain perspective, you're a this people person.
hmm
Versus studying Black folks or studying America means you understand the cycles,
hmm
right? Like you understand that time of progress when it comes to Black folks, whether it's real or imagined, is usually responded with like a force multiplier of the thing that occurred.
hmm
We look no further than Reconstruction. You can look, post-war. You can look post Black Power with the Southern strategy and the basically retrenchment of Southern whites from the Democratic Party.
hmm
Um, you can see this. Oh, you can look at again 84 and 88, and you see this kind of like building of power, and Jesse Jackson can run. And it's like, oh, Jesse Jackson thinks he can run. He's even bringing in Louis Farrakhan to have his back. Okay. Watch this in 88, Jack. Jesse
Yeah.
doesn't get the, and here's why this is important, because Jesse Jackson doesn't get the respect shown to him by the Democratic Party in 88.
hmm
But what he does get to do is institute people into the DNC. He does get to put a Ron Brown, um, who was his campaign manager, who then became Secretary of Commerce. So things happen like that, but there were retrenchments when it seems like Black folks is moving forward.
hmm
And then the wild idea of this whole thing, where people were like, hey, we're having a conversation about all quote unquote wokeness, which is what happened when you start to use words with people you shouldn't use words with.
Yeah.
Like stop
Stop
talking about
talking.
family business outside the family.
Yeah, man. That
But
ain't your
then
friends.
then it takes on a life unto itself. And so all this stuff's getting cut off. And then, but the first target is like, yeah, Black History Month. Nah, nah, we're not doing that. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, this is the kind of things that if you're a student of America, if you're a student of our history, then you absolutely knew this was coming.
Yeah,
And so that's where the study of history that only floats your boat is a dangerous thing
yeah,
because it makes you think that the history that you're into is the guiding force of history versus the actual cycles of the process,
mm-hmm.
because that's actually the guiding thing, that
Yeah,
America does the same thing over and over and over again,
yeah,
that what we see as the right rightward leaning, because the other part of this is, and this is like something I think folks need to think about and I want to share, is that we think of this stuff we call like the conservatives or the Republicans, but it's like what's happening now is not that. And we've talked about this. Basically, a set of people took over the Republican Party because it just was the party they could control.
yeah, yeah. They got their
A
ideas
vast
in.
majority of people who were establishment Republicans share some interest with this, but not a whole lot.
Right. But they just like, well, I mean, this might we might be able to work it out on the back end. So if we get in power, which is always at the center of that thing, if we get in power, we can maybe ameliorate, our feelings and get some of our ideas in there. You know what I'm saying? And it won't go too far off from the kind of stuff we into. You know what I mean? Um,
Yeah, and I think, but that part of it, because I was reading about like Rand Paul, and with the tariffs and everything, and like for folks who are not necessarily into looking at like economic policy, and when you use economic policy as a sledgehammer for other interests, like that is a crazy precedent.
yeah,
When you use the idea of tariffs and disrupting the entire North American economy, because people should not confuse this. That's what would have happened.
hmm
And that's why Mexico and Canada came to the table. And for folks, who are armchair revolutionaries, man, they should have stood their ground. They should have, yeah, okay. When you recognize that our economies are that intertwined, then you understand why that didn't happen. But when you use that to have them put 10,000 people at the border, which is signaling. So essentially, this administration has used economic violence or the threat of economic violence as a signaling idea for their social interests.
hmm
And again, from the actual order of global trade and free trade, and people have a variety of takes on that, right? I'm not, we could have that conversation, but whatever the order is, this is disrupting that. And you have Republicans that are like, yo, we don't want this. Like, tariffs are bad.
yeah, like
If a
everyone
mug
knows,
really,
like everybody knows.
yeah, like this idea that tariffs are going to bring revenue to us, you're lying. That's not what tariffs do. Because people cut at you, you might get a slightly better negotiation, but you're never going to remake the relationship. It's kind of like if you're in a relationship and you bring up something that somebody did messed up, you might get them to change something, but they're always going to be a little tight with you that you brought that up.
Yeah,
That's tariffs 101.
yeah.
Majestic economic, majestic tariffs 101 seems the
Seriously.
relationship. Like it's never going to be the same. And so I just think that we have to understand the situation and the space that we're in. And when it comes to our communities, and like it's one thing to talk about Black History Month, and then there's like Black Futures, right?
hmm
You have to see it in the context of being rooted in understanding these things and fostering and creating institutions. And I have to say this, guess what? Even your own tax money, because I ain't white folks, because it's your own tax money, it might not pay for it all the time. You just might have to pay for the stuff you want to see for you so no one can take it from you.
Yeah.
because at least for the next 2 to 4 years, depending on the swing in 2026, and even then it'll just be the House, right? Like, just say the Dems win the House, it's still a 2 to 1. So there's still going to be the ability to move stuff, right? I mean, there'll be some stuff, and I do trust that the folks who are currently in power and assuming they're in power in the Democratic Party will be thoughtful to kind of try to mitigate and ameliorate some of the harm. But like, this is where we are, and so acknowledging that and making a decision about, as you talk about all the time, like how you are going to decide to be without someone else's interaction or intervention.
Mm. Yeah, because it's, I mean, it's they're setting the terms of engagement, right? One of them is they just going straight out. If you be like, well, if you come forward with the thing that you want to do, and you start with, well, because this happened to black folks, you need to do this. They gonna tell you to kiss their ass. They gonna be like, we don't care about none of that. All we want to hear about is merit, right? They don't hear nothing about because you know you was harmed in the past that something is supposed to happen. Now that don't mean that you don't work on your policy constructs and that you understand what that means for you, as I see it. But if that is the when you're getting to what's the stuff, if you're involved in going, you need to engage the government. You need to really read the room, like on what it is you're trying to do and how you going to talk about it, right? And then outside of any of that, I really think the the affirming, like, what are you doing for us? What are you doing for yourself? You know what I'm saying? Centering that with each other. Like, whether that's, whatever the bond that allows you to make those type of moves together. If that's, me and my cousins, or me and my friends that I've been friends with for years, and we had a place in our lives where we can do something collectively, and these sorts of models, you know what I'm saying, when it gets to talking about like all the repair and harm that still needs to happen in a lot of the places that we inhabit, you know, the EPA going to be under pressure. The EPA wasn't rescinded from the money freeze. You know what I'm saying? The like what's the other I'm trying to think of, like, I don't know what they're going to do with the housing Department of Housing. Like, education going to be under pressure. Everything is going to be put in a weird spot where if that was the anchor point that was like, well, I can get leverage to get something that helps my community by, speaking to this or speaking to that within this particular interest, it's going to be a hard sled to get the resources soon. Like in the long term, you know what I mean, you might get what you need, but you might have to, we got to think about some other models in the immediate, right? And I'm curious if folks again will jump into our history and see like how often we be always coming up with some new fly stuff. We be like, all right, y'all doing it like this. We gonna, you know what I mean? We gonna hit them like this. We gonna come from the ribs. You know what I'm saying? You wouldn't let us. We wasn't barely in those universities, or get access to university education. But those that did would then what? Bring that scholarly practice to the community. And teach you about writing from sources and documenting your things, and doing essay contests and reading contests and oratory contests, doing these things that practice the ways you can study the world, and making it, basically into fun, and other ways of esteem and adulation, not just for, some, not as I see it, not just as some sort of mimicry of the larger society, but also to go like, yeah, like if we're gonna be able to run our own communities, we gotta like learn stuff. We gotta have our develop our ways or refresh our ways of documenting and understanding things. Also, though, you get the same at the same time example of folks like Zora Neale Hurston, who is saying, look, man, you study us, but don't be acting like because some of us speak the way we speak that we're not smart, that we don't have a history, or we're not wise, that we need to change that for them to have value and worth, right? Like, be in our gaze. You know what I'm saying? Don't be caught up in like trying to please them. You know what I mean? There's so many. layers to a lot of this that when folks are not, as I see it, actively engaged in like studying us and really like really reading stuff and looking at stuff and listening to old music, listening to new music, listening to the recent history. Um, getting into the various, everybody like a good, this person was running the streets and that's part of town in the 80s video on YouTube. But, don't just do that as like some gossip time. Think about that like, yo, they was a part of a socioeconomic reality that was like this was a place where somebody could use their creative economic genius to harm their community, but also to make a lot of money. And a lot of people that wasn't us made lots of money. For people ran a whole foreign wars on the trade that happened in our community, right? Like you could connect those dots in ways that do not just have you affirming sort of the oppression we experience, but looking at it and saying like, what are the powers at play in the things that are happening around me, right? And at least to me, to counter the the drive to maybe be pushed to apathy or like I'm gonna just tap out and just not really pay attention to all this until it's over or start that we a cursed people stuff and we just got to ride it out till somebody come save us or something like like get in the mix a little bit and then you use that creative genius because it's gonna be some wild times and then and my other thing I would say if you do work in government, don't fall for the okey doke. Don't sign no papers that, that you ain't have your lawyer look at.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I just think as we think about this and like, one of the things I'll say just, I think you captured it just right and exact. It's just, this stuff is going to be done with people. Like the solutions, and I think this is the thread that runs through what we're talking about. The solutions to this will be done with each other. It won't be done online. It won't be talking at each other. It will be sitting at a table with each other, figuring out things. And guess what? It may not all be a manifesto. Some of it will just be what's happening, and people will watch what's happening and come get involved. Everybody won't get to be like, well, can I read the paper first? What do we think about the paper?
Hmm.
Everybody's not going to get to read the paper.
Yeah,
They're going to watch what's occurring and then come and then evaluate, do they want to be a part of it?
yeah.
Right. And acknowledging that building community is that kind of way. And building community may have what you will call a Robert's Rules of Order, right?
Hmm.
Or it
Yeah,
may not.
yeah.
It's messy, right? Because even the creation of the tent, if you will, or the really strange alliances between a lot of folks that Trump has used to gain power is a messy thing. The social conservatives is kind of looking like sideways, like, all right, dog, y'all talking about all this other stuff. When y'all talking about the kids, and I'm not talking about in a positive way.
Right.
When y'all talking about life, Jack, like
Yeah.
so, those building those strong ties and building a tent that everyone can get under is a messy process. It's not a simple process. It doesn't make everybody feel good. Everyone's thing don't happen at the same time.
Hmm.
But in order to build community and most importantly for our children, many of whom, again, they don't have context for 80, 84, 88, 1980. They don't have context for hearing about like nuclear reactors melting down,
Yeah.
right? They don't have a context for all this kind of stuff when black folks had to throw their own festivals and you couldn't, there was no Beyonce world tour.
Yeah.
There was black
Nah.
folks throwing their own festivals in cities all across America and the world, largely with their own money
Yep.
in order to bring our art to each other, in order to bring our books to each other. And again, it's not this retrenching or acting like, you're falling out of the system. Recognize that at least in the short term, the system is not going to provide all the resources nor the attention that we have come to expect over the last 25, 30 years. It ain't just like the last six or eight
Yeah.
years,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
This has been in general, the things that I think about independent schools and how you had independent schools and I think about Council Independent Black Institution and other organizations,
Mm.
and then you had the charter school movement that kind of went alongside of it, and then a lot of folks that were like, oh, we can actually get resources, the public resources that our people pay into, to create schools that are uniquely suited for our communities. And it's like, again, people are different places on the chart on public charters. I'm not that's that's not the thing I'm talking about, but it was the idea that at some point you could get public and taxpayer funds to do the thing that you were doing without it before.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that has become more a part of the structure of what we kind of understand is how we educate our children more than the black independent school, than the super black after school program. Those things have been kind of put and structured into the broader system, which I absolutely think is a good thing. But in times where that may be pulling back, and they may be, and those things may be retrenching, we have to ground ourselves in what we think is important for our mental, physical, economic, and more important, but the basic, like our psychic survival.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think that's the biggest thing, that if we're not careful, a lot of us are tuning out psychically,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's the danger.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I would encourage folks to stay grounded, stay in the game here. Like, whether this is the early rounds, right? This is the early rounds. They throw, mad punches is coming, mad blows. Some of them is definitely below the belt, right? But just you got to weather through to figure out really what you're working on, and before, because it's we was never promised that the I guess the liberation had arrived at any point. You know what I'm saying? So if you had thought that that's where you were before, what I mean, it's a reminder that we still in the cycles. You know what I'm saying? We're still in this space where the place that we know as home is also a place that we have to be protective of ourselves, and protective of our families and our communities, as we engage. And whew, so, read a book, go hang out with your cousin or something. You know what I'm saying? Go talk to
Right?
some kids.
Read.
Go do something with some kids, man. Go like take some kids, do something with something, go to a site, go to somewhere where
and,
something
and,
happened.
and go and read the book before you start telling them stuff. I
Yeah,
just
yeah,
want
read the
to
book first. Don't just don't be making it up. All
say,
right.
peace.
Well, so with that, yeah, and again, don't sign nothing you ain't read closely, brothers, sisters, everybody out there. Watch your back. They coming with the wolf tickets. So, all right. So with that, I mean, I don't got nothing else for the good of the order. Just tell you.
The order is bad, but the order tonight is good.
Indeed. All right. So with that, I say peace.
Peace.
Thank you for listening to Good Brothers. Thank you to my good brother, I'm Majestic. Good Brothers is a part of the Ask Your Old Head podcast. And you can support the podcast by listening, rating, subscribing, sharing wherever you listen. You can also support by searching for me, Justice Rajee, on Patreon, and signing up to become a patron. And that monthly is going to be immensely interesting. Any day now. You know what I'm saying? I know you like Justice, you full of it. You keep saying any day now, but I ain't seen that. But I'm like, ha ha ha, it's coming. You know what I'm saying? So, thank you for supporting this creative work of mine. And as I move forward in 2025 and we collectively see the world as it is, you know what I'm saying? It's going to get real, real. So, thank you for listening once again, and peace.